many of us live in a community where we think everything is okay, when many times it's really not.
911 was the emergency.
There's a black male running down the street.
Ahmaud Arbery was jogging through a South Georgia neighborhood when he was followed by 2 pickup trucks with 3 men.
We pull up beside him, hey, stop, we want to talk to you. And he just keeps on running.
Bryan's truck is in the middle of the road. The McMichaels are behind him. He's trapped.
Should we been chasing him? I don't know.
We continue to move forward in this prosecution.
Murder in the streets.
He was just jogging.
He was my baby.
That was a heartbreaking moment in the courtroom.
There's a deep culture of racism here.
This is not some hate crime.
The Justice Department announced federal hate crime charges in the death of Ahmaud Arbery.
This makes you have to look at some tough issues.
But we begin with what was a particularly heinous crime that caused a national outcry. Today, 3 white men who chased Ahmaud Arbery before he was shot and killed were back in court, trying to get their hate crime convictions thrown out. The video of the attack that we are about to show you is hard to watch, but it is an important reminder. Arbery was just running through their neighborhood when father and son, Greg and Travis McMichael, armed themselves, got into a pickup truck, and gave chase. Their neighbor, William Roddie Bryan, soon joined them in his own truck and recorded Travis shooting Arbery dead on the street. For Ahmaud Arbery's family, this moment is opening up blistering and painful wounds.
I am so hurt still, because when we saw what happened at first, we thought this would be over with now. And for people to keep giving money for these people to appeal, and the way they took my nephew's life, this is destroying my family. This is sickening to see somebody gun down a baby that was out for a jog. No other family deserves to go through what we're going through right now.
All right.
It's sickening. If you're not sick when you see this, it will make you sick. I've been sick ever since 2020.
NBC's Blaine Alexander is outside the courthouse in Atlanta. Also with us, Axios senior politics reporter Eugene Scott and former prosecutor and civil rights attorney Kristen Gibbons-Fedden. Good to have both of you here. So, Blaine, after that conviction in Georgia State Court, it happened back in 2021, Ahmaud Arbery's mother said her son could finally rest in peace. Then today, you heard the visceral hurt, the anger in his aunt's voice, having to deal with this, to relive this over again. How did legal arguments land today?
Well, I think you said it, Chris. I think the fact that the Arbery family is back here now more than 4 years after Ahmaud Arbery was killed, really fighting to make sure that this conviction is upheld, is something that is a strong pain point for them. You heard it from his aunt. We'll hear it from his father in just a second. I think that's certainly painful for the Arbery family. But then when you kind of widen this out and look at what exactly this conviction was, remember, this is a federal hate crimes conviction. As you said, they've already been convicted of murder in a state court. That sentence is separate from this one. But when you look at this, this was really of symbolic significance, because of the 3 deaths that we saw back in 2020, of course, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, it was Ahmaud Arbery's that was the only one that brought any sort of conviction based on race. And so that's why we saw organizations like the NAACP, like Black Voters Matter, like other community activists who were also coming out here to express their concern that this could possibly be appealed and overturned. Here's a little bit of what we heard from Marcus Arbery, though. Of course, he's Ahmaud Arbery's father, and he spoke very passionately about what today represented to them. Take a look.
What happened to Ahmaud is everybody's problem.
Right.
Because if we don't stop this now, this country gonna go backwards. We got to bring changes. Right. We got to make our young people feel free to run and have fun and not chase down like animals. Because our black people are human beings, our young people.
Yes, sir.
And I don't want none of them to walk to school to fear their life. So I tell you one thing, it's all our problem. That's why we got to make these people be accountable for what they done
right.
to my baby.
And so you heard those passionate words there from Marcus Arbery, the father of Ahmaud Arbery. Now, of course, Chris, the question is, what will the decision be in all of this? We still are going to wait likely a few weeks before we hear how the judges decide on this. Chris.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Blaine Alexander. So, Kristen, let's talk about the arguments that came up. One of them in the legal briefs was that the past racist comments by these guys who've been convicted on social media inflamed the jury while failing to prove that they did this because of Arbery's race. Here's what the AP notes, quote, the social media evidence included a 2018 Facebook comment that Travis McMichael made on a video of a black man playing a prank on a white person. He used an expletive and a racial slur, writing, I'd kill that blank. What do you make of the argument that was in court?
I suspect that the prosecution is actually going to be successful in their argument. Really, whenever you have a hate crime, the prosecution must prove at the trial level that the defendants intentionally targeted the victim because of race. So when we look at the evidence that was presented, right, those dozen racist text messages and the social media posts, yes, evidence, unfortunately, can have a damaging, it can be very prejudicial to the jury when it comes in. But if the probative nature of that evidence outweighs the prejudicial value, then it's fair game. And that is what the prosecution is arguing. That was a key evidence that they needed in order to counter the defendant's argument that it was about him being a criminal and not about him being black. But they were able to show, those nasty text messages, some of which included the N-word, others derogatory language directed at black people, to show that their actions were actually motivated by race. And that's why it constituted a hate crime.
The other thing, Kristen, that's worth noting is that the defendant's lawyers relied on a lot of legal technicalities in making their arguments. Amy Lee Copeland, for example, who's the lawyer for Travis McMichael, focused today on prosecutors, they say, failing to prove that Arbery was killed on public roads. Take a listen. That grounds for an appeal?
It is grounds for an appeal because it could challenge whether or not it was rightfully brought in federal court. But again, going back to the evidence that was actually presented at the trial level, where the prosecution presented evidence of service request records and testimony from county officials, which were intended to show that those streets were treated as public. They were public streets, and therefore it constituted a public place. In other words, what the prosecution had to prove as part of it was that Mr. Arbery was murdered in the public streets. And I think that that would be sufficient to show it. So while it is grounds for an appeal, again, I suspect it's not going to be successful.
The subtext of this, of course, Eugene, is that the criminal justice system, in a way that's kind of flipped from what we've seen in the past, is on trial today. Because when the state verdict first came down, activists felt a kind of sense of hope that a broken system was maybe showing some signs of changing. Today also brings back a lot of those feelings for people who have fought for racial justice. Does this system today feel any less broken?
I'm not quite sure that it does. And I think that's what we saw Ahmaud's aunt articulate. They had a sense, they being the family, a sense of peace and comfort when this federal conviction went forward, because with this, in the event that the state conviction would have been overturned, this still meant that these individuals were going to serve significant prison time. But if this does get overturned, there is a chance, they fear, that perhaps these individuals will not have to serve out their full life sentences in the event that those cases are appealed as well. And so that's why you see civil rights organizations say that it's really important that federal hate crime convictions stand in situations like this.